Hello and welcome to the Commander's Quarters. I'm your host, Mitch. Glad to have you here. Here at the Commander's Quarters, we're all about Commander on a budget. Today we have an episode of Commander's 2 Cents. On episodes like these, I give you my own personal take on topics about the format in general and current news. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. And while you're at it, subscribe and review our podcast as well. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all of their support. Hello and welcome to the Commander's Quarters. I'm your host, Mitch. Glad to have you here. So today we're going to be talking about cards that might be seeing a bit too much play in Commander. These cards maybe at one point were considered to be staples of the format, and they just continually see play because maybe some people see them on EDH rec and they've got a decently high percentage, so they're like, oh, I've got to play that card. But in my opinion, they're seeing too much play, and you should probably stop playing them because there are better options out there. Now, of course, there are certain decks that can still use the cards that they'll function really well in, but I think overall, and we'll talk about some of those circumstances, overall, they're seeing a bit too much play, so I urge you, please stop playing these cards, okay? Let's go through them one at a time, or one or two-ish at a time. Some are categorized. It's okay. Here we go. So first up, we've got Elvish Mystic, and we'll also include in there Llanowar Elves, okay? So these are mana dorks that cost 1 and they tap for 1. They both cost a green and tap for a green. These are great for certain decks, okay? And I know in competitive metas, these are probably going to see a bit more play because you want really fast mana and you want to ramp as quickly as you can, and you don't care really about wraths because, again, I'm no expert on CEDH, but I believe that too many wraths are not played because, regardless, okay, outside of competitive, let's go to casual, okay? In casual games, yes, you also want to ramp fast, but you want to do in a safe way, okay? And in casual Magic, a safe way is lands, land ramp. Land ramp is protected. And artifacts are even more so safer than mana dorks are. Mana dorks are the least safe version of ramp, in my opinion. Essentially, you get your mana dork out there early, that's great, you're ramping early, that's fantastic. If someone casts a board wipe, they're taking out all your mana dorks, and then you lose all that mana that you had built up. If you're casting spells like a Rampant Growth, instead you're getting lands into play. And again, in casual Magic, one of the unwritten rules is do not blow up lands, so you're kind of taking advantage of that. Yes, as a green player, you'll do that, but mana dorks, again, are not safe ramp. Now, there's a time and a place for them. There are plenty of decks out there. There are plenty of, mono green decks that are very low to the ground that have a ton of creatures, or Gruul decks that do the same, that you want your mana dorks and that you benefit from having a lot of creatures in that deck. And that's great, but not every single deck wants to do that. And I think that some people say, okay, Llanowar Elves, Elvish Mystic, great, I can ramp early. It's earlier than a Rampant Growth because I can get it down on turn 1 instead of turn 2, and that's fantastic. But it's not safe ramp. It is ramp that eventually someone's going to cast a board wipe and you lose. So you want to make sure that your mana sources stay around. So again, land ramp, like your Rampant Growths, like your Farseeks, are going to be much safer than mana dorks. And yes, they're extremely efficient, but in my opinion, that doesn't matter. It depends on the deck. Again, there are plenty of decks that I've used both of these mana dorks in, and there are other mana dorks that I've used in decks too. But again, I think that some people just consider it to be I have a green deck, I want these mana sources, that's great. I urge you to consider different ones, please. Just because, again, the safer your ramp is, the more likely you're going to be more likely you are to be able to stick around in the long run. So again, a casual game is going to go 10 or so or more turns. There's bound to be a board wipe or 2 in there. And again, if you've got mana dorks as your only source of ramp, you're going to be out of luck as soon as someone casts 1, and you're going to be way behind everyone else. So again, just my opinion, but I'm sharing it with you right now. So let's move on to the next one. And this is kind of a similar argument-ish, kind of. And those are going to be Inefficient Mana Rocks, and on here I've got Darksteel Ingot. Actually, let's just tackle these one at a time. Darksteel Ingot. Darksteel Ingot is a mana rock that costs 3 and it taps to add 1 mana of any color, and it's indestructible. So I've mentioned this before on the channel. My opinion when it comes to ramp is that you want to ramp on turn 2. Or at the very least, you want to get half as much mana as you put into something. So a Mind Stone costs 2 and it taps for 1. Perfect. Okay, you're getting half as much as you put into it. A Darksteel Ingot costs 3 and taps for 1. You're getting a third as much as you put into it. So it's less efficient. It's slower than the other mana rocks that you could possibly using in your deck. And it's just not as good in my opinion. Yes, it's protected. It's essentially like a land, most kind of ish. You know, because basically it's indestructible, so it's going to be hard for people to remove. Although there are plenty of things that can exile artifacts as well. So like a Merciless Execution or whatnot. Now, or Merciless Evacuation. Whatever it is. Okay, anyway, there are ways to exile artifacts, okay? Not that someone's going to be specifically targeting yours, but again, the main point of this is I'd rather have Signets in my deck, I'd rather have Talismans in my deck, I'd rather have Diamonds in my deck, I'd rather have a multitude of of mana rocks in my deck instead of Darksteel Ingot. It protects itself, but it's not really worth that extra mana in my opinion. It's going to be just a bit too slow, okay? Next one is similar, that sees a lot of play because it has the word commander on it, and it shows up in, I think, every commander precon, or a lot of them. I don't know. Maybe not all of them, but a lot of them. And that's Commander Sphere. It costs 3. It taps at 1 mana of any color in your commander's color identity, so any color that you need. And then you can sacrifice it for free to draw a card. So, yes, you get value out of it. It's somewhat like a Mind Stone in that aspect. And you can sack it for free. It doesn't even have to pay or tap to do so, which is great. But again, you're paying that extra mana. It's just too slow in my opinion. I'd much rather run any mana rock that costs 2 over this. Essentially, not any. There are definitely some that you wouldn't want to run, but like a Guardian Idol, I would run over this, or unless you really need that mana fixing. And the Diamond Cycle, Talismans, Signets again, like, and those are hard comparisons, obviously, because those are, you know, staples of the format. But there are plenty of mana rocks that cost 2 that work a lot better than this one, and people just, I think it's because it is in the precons, and we'll talk about another one later that shows up in a lot of decks, that might be a factor as to why it sees so much play. People say, oh, okay, well, this is completely fine. I should be ramping on turn 3, and I should be playing mana rocks that give me some extra value. The more important thing, in my opinion, is to make sure that you can get ahead. So you want to ramp as early as possible. Turn 2 again for the most part, except for Soul Ring, and if you've got money, Mana Crypt. Yeah, so mana rocks, please have them cost 2 if they're going to tap for 1. If you want to pay 3 for mana rock, make sure that's a Worn Power Stone, because that taps for 2. Or if you want a mana rock that costs 4, it has to tap for 2 or 3. Anyway, so on and so forth. Make sure your mana rocks are efficient. That's all I'm going to say. Okay? Now let's go to some inefficient land ramp, is my next little segment here. And that's going to be Solemn Simulacrum. Solemn Simulacrum is, let's just read it real quick, a golem that costs 4. It is a 2/2. When it enters the battlefield, you may search your library for a basic land card, put that card into the battlefield, tap, then shuffle your library. And when it dies, you may draw a card. So, again, this is kind of the every color gets land ramp kind of card. But you don't. It's not a Wayfarer's Bauble, okay? It costs 4 for 1 land. It's ramping you by 1, and it ramps you by 1, and it costs 4. That is extremely inefficient. I mean, in the green comparisons, you've got things like a Farhaven Elf, right? Which I believe does the exact same thing when it comes in. You don't draw a card when it dies, but it costs 1 less at least. And again, when you're ramping with lands, you want your sources to cost 2 or 3 at the most, in my opinion. Yes, this can go in any deck, and that's great. But it's still just not quite there. And it's just, Sad Robot is going to stay sad, okay? Even though it can draw you a card, I don't think that makes up for its inefficiency. It's just too slow. I think that other colors want, like mono white decks. There are plenty of mono white decks out there that run Core Cartographer. And it's, again, just, you're paying 4 to get 1 land. Yes, it's protected ramp, but just play mana rocks that cost 2. In general, they're protected for the most part. Yes, unless you're playing in a meta that's very heavy on Vandal Blast or other things like that, then you might need to make some other kinds of considerations. But for the most part, your mana rocks are going to be fine. So make sure that you're ramping efficiently and don't kind of make poor decisions because you want to imitate that green player and you're trying to use your Sad Robot. Now, that being said, there are decks that can abuse blink effects, so this could fit in those kinds of decks. But for the most part, Sad Robot is going to stay sad, okay? Just leave him be. Next up, we've got some inefficient removal that I think is seeing a bit too much play that I would recommend taking out for some other removal, if you can. First up, let's go through Putrefy. Putrefy is an instant that costs 1 black-green. It says destroy target artifact or creature. It can't be regenerated. So, yes, this is flexible removal for the most part. It gets rid of either an artifact or a creature, and that's great. And it can't be regenerated, so that usually doesn't come into play. There aren't too many creatures out there that regenerate, or artifacts out there that regenerate, but you never know. Anyways, there are better options out there. Beast Within, of course, is just strictly better. Destroys any permanent. It doesn't stop the regeneration, but again, that doesn't really matter. It gives them a 3/3, but that doesn't matter in Commander. So obviously, Beast Within, great card. Use it, okay? Assassin's Trophy is a very expensive card. That one is better. Abrupt Decay, also slightly more expensive, or not more expensive than that, but it's around $5, I believe, right now. So there are better options. When it comes to removal, though, I think it's more important, and just my opinion, it's my meta. So yours might be different. So again, take everything with a grain of salt. But dealing with artifacts and enchantments are more important with target removal than creatures. Again, you've got board wipes that can deal with creatures. Your target removal should be more so focused on artifacts and enchantments. So something like a Return to Nature, which can deal with an artifact, an enchantment, or it can exile a card from a graveyard, is very flexible. It's cheaper than this, and it can fit in more decks. It's just going to be better, okay? The other one that I want to talk about for inefficient removal is Mortify, and this one I think is definitely more pronounced because it's in Orzhov. So let me just read it real quick. It's an instant that costs 1 white-black, and it says destroy target creature or enchantment. So this one is similar to Putrefy, obviously. Instead of destroying an artifact, it destroys an enchantment. It doesn't have that regeneration clause in it. But basically, Orzhov has a ton of great removal options. You've got your Utter End, you've got Anguished Unmaking, you've got Despark. You've got plenty of better options when it comes to getting rid of things. And Mortify is just something that really shouldn't be seeing play right now unless... I don't even know if there's an unless. You could run a card like Oblation instead, which is one of my favorites. It's a very flexible card. Oblation, I believe, I don't have it in front of me, I should, is the owner of target non-land permanent shovels it into the library, then draws 2 cards. So basically, you can get rid of anything. It's even better than destroying something at certain points because shuffling into the library is harder for things, or for players to recur or get back than something in their graveyard. But anyways, you can also just use it on one of your own permanents if you're desperate, if it's going to be destroyed anyway and you want to draw 2 cards. It's a flexible card. There are better options than Mortify. That one I won't budge on. Putrefy, I could budge a little bit, but Mortify, absolutely not. Please stop playing that card. Okay? Next up are going to be cantrips. And these cantrips are really good in other formats. I don't think, unless they're a specific deck or in your competitive meta, and we'll get through them one at a time, but basically, I think cantrips just aren't as effective in Commander as they are in other formats, and they're kind of a wasted card for the most part. Preordain is a sorcery that costs blue, and it says scry 2, then draw a card. Ponder is a sorcery that costs a blue, and it says look at the top 3 cards of your library, put them back in any order. You may shuffle your library, draw a card. And Brainstorm is an instant that says that costs a blue, that says draw 3 cards, then put 2 cards from your hand on top of your library in any order. Now, if you're playing in a competitive meta, and you've got a ton of fetch lands in your deck that you can keep, reshuffling your deck if you put things on top or whatnot, that's great. You can take advantage of Brainstorm, putting them back on top. Sure. Okay, let's go through more decks real quick that could use this before I bash the cards. Storm decks, obviously, you're going to be casting a ton of cantrips. That's great, okay? Those kinds of decks can really use them. Decks like a Golos deck where you want to set the top of your library, or other kinds of decks where you want to set the top of your library, they work great. But for the vast majority of decks out there, and I can't remember what percentage of play that these see, I believe Brainstorms are only 35% of possible decks. It's absurd. It is not a card that really gives you card advantage for the most part. It just replaces itself. It's not drawing you extra cards. You need spells in Commander that actually provide you card advantage. You want spells like a Factor Fiction. You want spells that draw you more than 1 card instead of just replacing themselves, which is basically what Brainstorm and the other ones do. Now again, there are decks that can use them, but I think that many people just see Brainstorm for whatever reason as a mono blue staple that goes in any deck that has blue, and I urge you to reconsider that, please. Okay? Just think about it next time. Before you put that Brainstorm in the deck, brainstorm a little bit up here, okay? And think of better cards. That was corny and bad. Okay, let's continue. All right, this one I will never budge on. It's labeled as Inefficient Counterspell. It's cancel. So cancel is an instant that costs 1 blue and it says counter target spell. Counterspell is an instant that costs blue and it says counter target spell. It does the exact same thing for 1 less. Obviously, counterspell is not the gold standard because there's mana drain and whatnot, but it is an amazing counterspell. And cancel, if you're going to be paying 3 mana for a spell that counters something, you need to get more out of it. And there are a ton of options, and I'm not even going to list them here, but just literally, if you want to type in on Scryfall, 3 CMC, counter target spell, you can find anything other than cancel. Anything that does, it doesn't matter what it does something else other than just counter target spell, it's going to be better. So please, I think it's still in like 4% of decks right now. Take it out of your decks. Unless you're running like Baral 80 counter spells into your deck, don't run this. Please, there are better options, okay? All right, perfect. Let's move on. All right, this one I've got a little asterisk next to because we'll go through it here. Harmonize. I say in my asterisk is not in blue deck. So this is basically specifically for people who have this in a green deck that also has blue. There is no reason, for the most part, to run Harmonize in a deck that has blue. Or even some decks that have black too. There are just better ways to draw cards for the most part. And again, we'll get to it here. Probably less than black. Okay, ignore that part. Let's go back to the blue part. They're just better blue draw spells, not brainstorm, other things, okay? Concentrate, I believe Concentrate's the card. I should have it written down. Concentrate does the exact same thing as Harmonize, but in blue, okay? And it sees play in 1% of total decks. So, and I'm not sure what the percentage of Harmonize in blue decks is, but it's way too high last time I checked. So, if you're running Harmonize in a deck that has blue, please take it out. There are better draw options when it comes to blue. Yes, Harmonize is great in decks that have green because green doesn't have a lot of ways to draw cards. It does with creatures. Ignore that. Anyway, you don't have a lot of ways to just draw, pay forward, draw 3 cards. It's the only way in green to do so, I believe. So, if you're running blue, you've got better options. Go out and search for them. There are plenty of other ones out there. Just use those. Do not run Harmonize in your deck that has blue, okay? And let's go through some lands here that might upset some people because I know they're fan favorites for some players. So, here we go. Reliquary Tower. This one I might get the most flack for out of everything. I'm going to look for the list. Maybe Brainstorm. But Reliquary Tower, this one I think is vastly overplayed. It is a land that says you have no maximum hand size, and it taps for a colorless. So no maximum hand size is a great thing. Thought Vessel is, I can't remember how expensive it is right now, and it's a mana rack that costs 2 and taps for 1, and it just says you have no maximum hand size. So basically, yes, that is a fantastic thing. There's a reason that's expensive. Reliquary Tower does the same thing as a land, which is great because it's kind of not taking up a slot in your deck, but the number of decks that's being used in is pretty absurd. I think that basically people see no maximum hand size as this just incredible thing. Oh my goodness, I don't have to discard cards. Having 7 cards versus having 10 cards is not really that big of a difference. Yes, in some decks that are going to be drawing a ton of cards and need to keep a 20-card hand or whatnot, they're going to be having a great time with a Reliquary Tower in play. But for, I can't remember what the percentage was for mono white decks, but it's pretty high. How many mono white decks out there do you know that are going to be drawing a ton of cards? They're going to be having ever more than 7 cards in their hand. The Reliquary Tower would ever be helpful. Yes, it's not really taking up a slot in that deck, but there are other better utility lands that you can use that will actually help you out. And for 3-color or more decks, yes, that is a consideration when it comes to having a card that is taking up a land slot that doesn't help fix your mana at all. And if you've got, a very expensive deck with a ton of fetch lands and, the perfect mana base, sure, you can get away with that, but I think the vast majority of decks can't. You can't just take up a slot with a Reliquary Tower without having to consider that, is this worth potentially not having my mana fixed or having another utility land that could help, like a Bajuka Bog or something like that. Again, that taps for a black, but still, having something that is a bit more helpful in most circumstances, then, it's slightly inconvenient when at the end of the turn I have 8 cards instead of 7. I have to discard 1. Most of the time, you're just going to be pitching a land and it doesn't matter. So, please, 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 please reconsider Reliquary Tower for decks that really don't need it. Okay, yes, most mono color decks could probably use it because it's not taking a slot. Again, I will argue against mono white because you're not drawing cards because Wizards won't let mono white draw cards. But for decks that are 3 or more colors, you really need to consider that spot because there are other cards that have more utility potentially, and it's not helping fix your mana, and that is very important in decks that have 3 or more colors. So I'm leaving it at that. And again, I'm probably going to get a ton of comments on how Reliquary Tower is everyone's favorite card, but it's okay. This last one I might not get too much flack on, so let's stick with it. Temple of the False God. Temple of the False God is a land that has tap, add, colorless, activate ability only if you control 5 or more lands. This is one that I definitely believe is, I don't know if it's still in precons, but it's definitely in a lot of precons before recently. And it was in pretty much every single one, I believe. Or I could be wrong. I don't know. Anyways, I should do more research before I'm talking about this. But basically, Temple of the False God is way overplayed because players are like, oh, this land taps for 2 mana. It's awesome. It's kind of like a mana crypt, but with no downside. Except for the fact that, mana crypt with no downside. Ancient Tomb. Whatever, okay? With no downside. But yeah, you got to get to 5 lands, and you're not always going to have 5 lands with it. And there are plenty of times where I've seen players stuck at like 3 or 4 lands with this in play, and it does nothing for them, and they have to keep waiting to draw another card for this to actually tap for mana. This is not going to be helpful for you most of the time. Okay, you draw it later. Great, I got a land that taps for 2. Fantastic. But it's going to hurt you more often than it really helps you. So please, this is not an auto-include by any means. Yes, there are decks that can use it. There are plenty of decks out there that can use it, but there are more decks out there that can't use it. I phrased that terribly. But really consider what you're doing before you include this one in your deck. There are decks out there that do want a land that taps for 2. I think my Maelstrom Wanderer deck probably runs it, but again, that runs a lot of weird things. But still, Temple of the False God is not an auto-include or a staple or a card that should be even used in most decks. So please, 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 please take it out of your decks, except for very few circumstances. Okay. And you know who you are if you're running that. Okay, so that's all I got for today. Yeah, please just let me know in the comments below, how wrong I am or how right I am, or just your thoughts about this episode, your thoughts about these cards. Are there any other cards that you think are seeing far too much play elsewhere that you think people should stop playing? So yeah, just let me know in the comments below. But yeah, anyways, thanks again and have a good one. And make sure you're following us on social media for more updates and sneak peeks on future episodes. Again, a huge thank you to my patrons who help make this show possible. I truly couldn't do any of this without your support. If you want to support this channel directly, consider becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, including being able to vote on future commanders for deck techs. There are even tiers where you get your own personalized deck tech dedicated to you. You can check out all the Patreon tiers and rewards at patreon.com/commandersquarters. If you haven't already, make sure that you like and subscribe to the channel. Here at the Commander's Quarters, we're all about budget commander. So while you're at it, go ahead and check out some of our other types of episodes. And with that, I'm out of here. Thanks again and have a good one.